Okay, so why was everything about sex? That's what people say, right? Freud made everything about sex. But was it really about sex? Did he really make everything about sex? This is where historical context really matters. So when Freud insists that elongated objects represent penises or hollow objects represent vaginas, modern readers tend to understandably roll their eyes. I mean, sometimes a cigar is just a cigar, right? I don't think he ever actually said that. But the question stands, why was Freud so focused on sex? Well, let's look at the world he was working in. So turn of the century Vienna was deeply, deeply puritanical. I mean, women couldn't show their ankles in public. Masturbation was treated as like a medical disorder, seriously. And like sexual education barely existed. Even within marriage, sex wasn't something you talked about. It was something you managed, hid, or possibly even got diagnosed for. And I mean, in that context, of course, dreams were full of sexual symbolism. Where else could these repressed desires go to be explored? The unconscious mind had to smuggle sexual content past both social censors and internal restraint. Dreams were like the underground newspapers in totalitarian states. Like everything had to be communicated in code. You couldn't just say it outright. Now here's what's really interesting. Modern dream research supports the continuity hypothesis, which suggests that dreams reflect waking concerns, and that those concerns are shaped by the culture you live in. So Freud wasn't wrong about his patients. He was just working with a very specific clinical sample in a very specific cultural moment in time. The real point here isn't that Freud was making everything about sex. It's that he was making everything about repression. And in the culture he lived in, sexual thoughts were among the most heavily repressed. So of course, that's where they kept showing up. Because if something is heavily repressed, it doesn't just disappear. It has to find another way in.
This log.
Yes.
I think perhaps you should entertain the possibility that it represents the penis.
Now, Freud goes deep into dream symbolism in this section, and he starts cataloging some of these symbols we were just talking about, right? Elongated objects are penises, hollow objects are vaginas, but he's careful to say that these symbols are not universal. However, I feel that he doesn't clarify strongly enough how easy these lists are to misuse. I mean, someone can skim this section or skim the rest of the book, go right to this list section, and walk away thinking Freud was proposing a universal dream dictionary. I've literally had conversations with people in real life who insist, incorrectly, but they insist that Freud believed symbols always mean the same thing in every single dream, no matter where you are in the world, even though he explicitly says that's not what he means in this book. So like a staircase might represent sex in old Vienna, but in another culture, like in another era, it might just be going up the stairs. And here's the thing, Freud knew that. As I said, he says repeatedly that symbols aren't universal. The problem is modern readers often skip that context. And I suspect sometimes they do it deliberately. I mean, it's a lot easier to mock a caricature of someone than actually engage with what they actually wrote. Now, that's not so much a limitation of Freud, right? It's more of a limitation of how he's been read by modern readers. Now, that said, I feel like there still is a real limitation here. Any symbolic list, no matter how carefully you hedge, makes it really tempting to just stop digging for more information once you found your answer on some list. Now, let me show you a perfect example of both Freud's brilliance and his limitations. This is an interesting example because he doesn't take the dream where you would think Freud would take it based on our public understanding of how he's talked about, how he's talked about in the modern era. So anyway, in this dream, a young unmarried man named Müller is sitting at a table in the restaurant where he usually eats, along with some other people. Suddenly, several men show up to arrest him. As Müller is being led off, he turns back to the people at the table and says, "I'll pay later, I'll come back." To which the people at the table mockingly laugh at him and reply, That's what they all say, and there goes another one. Müller is then taken into a narrow room, and inside this narrow room, there's a woman carrying a child in her arms. And there's this other guy there, like some sort of high-ranking police official, like a lieutenant of sorts. And he's turning over a bundle of papers, repeating the same name over again. Müller, Müller, Müller. One of the men finally introduces him by announcing him as, "This is Herr Müller." The police official then asks Müller a question, to which Müller replies, "I will." Müller then looks at the woman with the child in her arms and notices that she now has a large beard. Now, from the dreamer's associations, Freud identifies two overlapping fantasies. One is about being arrested, and the other is about getting married. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. The restaurant is where engaged couples dined. "I'll come back." That's what prisoners say when they're being taken away. And it's also what bachelors say when they get engaged. The derisive smiles, that's what they all say. There goes another one. Another man arrested or another man married. The inspector chanting Müller, 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 like reading telegrams at a wedding. And "I will," like the man answers, "I will." That's a wedding vow. In the end, the marriage fantasy even wins out because the bride appears in the dream, but she has a beard. Okay, then I realized something huge. This whole marriage as an imprisonment theme, that's captured perfectly in the Spanish word esposas. So esposas in Spanish means both wives and handcuffs. Think about that for a second. An entire language has encoded the fear of marriage as imprisonment into a single word. It's baked into the language, a culture smuggling an anxiety into ordinary speech. Marriage as a loss of freedom, as of being chained up, basically as being arrested by another name. Now, Freud didn't name that esposas or make that connection esposas in the book, likely because he didn't speak Spanish, but he intuitively picked up on this theme brilliantly. The overlapping arrest and marriage fantasies are expressing the same fundamental anxiety about losing autonomy. It all maps onto both scenarios, marriage and being arrested, because they both share the same emotional core, depending on your perspective. But then we get to the bearded woman, and Freud begins to explain the beard, but only in like the narrowest, safest way possible. He literally treats it like a joke about women aging to look like their fathers. That's it. No deeper exploration. Now, when I read this, I was expecting classical Freud, like diving into sexual symbolism, gender anxiety, maybe some repressed homosexuality. I mean, we're talking about a woman with a beard in 1900s Vienna. The symbolism is screaming to be analyzed. Think about this. In the 20th century, in 20th century LGBTQ slang, a beard was literally a woman who serves as a cover for a gay man's sexuality by marrying him. So like gay guys would marry women, and that woman was their beard. Because being gay was like socially unacceptable back then, unfortunately. And so they would marry a woman, and people referred, "Oh, that's his beard." Okay, now that meaning didn't exist in Freud's time, but still, the bearded woman could have represented fear of a domineering wife, anxiety about gender roles, latent homosexuality, the unveiling of the spouse's true nature, or even castration anxiety, right? Mr. freaking king of castration, Freud. It could have been about the woman acquiring a phallus. Or it could have even represented maybe attraction to masculinity displaced onto a safe female form. I mean, Freud sometimes seems phallic symbols everywhere. But when an actual masculine symbol literally shows up on a woman's face, he just shrugs and says, whatever. I mean, it's one of those moments where like you realize even this genius has blind spots. So I don't know. I just thought that was really weird. I was really expecting Freud to like go deep on some unhinged sexual rant about what a bearded woman would mean in a dream. But he just shrugs, says, whatever, it's nothing. Anyway, the bearded woman dream shows Freud stopping short. But the dental dreams he explores in the next section shows Freud going way too far. In my view, he goes way too far here. So Freud analyzes dreams about teeth falling out and concludes that they represent guilt for masturbating. And his reasoning? Well, he noticed that patients showed resistance when discussing these dreams about teeth falling out, which to him suggested repressed sexual content. And he connects it to the German slang where pulling one out can mean masturbation. Now, we have a similar saying in English, like you hear like a lot of military people say rubbing one out. That's like a code for masturbation. I guess in like German slang back then, they used to say pulling one out. And that's where he makes that connection with dreams about like losing your teeth. I'm not totally sure where he gets like pulling one out of like losing your teeth. I mean, this seems far-fetched to me. But anyway, he says that pulling one out or losing your teeth means masturbation. And he claims that across multiple male patients, these dreams correlated with unresolved masturbation-related anxieties from puberty. The guy that looked at a bearded woman and said, whatever, thinks dreams about losing your teeth are about masturbation anxiety. Wait, I mean, what? What is this dude even talking about? Even considering Victorian sexual repression, even accepting that dreams use symbolic displacement, even giving Freud every benefit of the doubt, I feel like this is a serious, serious stretch. The connection between teeth and masturbation just doesn't seem culturally grounded. It doesn't seem linguistically consistent across languages. And I mean, it's not even that compelling of a metaphor. I mean, again, like I said, pulling one out, losing your teeth, other than maybe a dentist pulling out your tooth, there's just, and these dreams, that's not even what these dreams were about. Freud doesn't say that the dreams were about going to the dentist and having your teeth pulled out. He says they were about having a dream where you lose your teeth, and somehow he makes that connection to pulling one out. I don't know, he's reaching here. I feel like this is where Freud's theory just became too much like, you know that saying, when you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail? I think that's what was going on here. I mean, not every dream element needs a secret sexual decoder ring. Sometimes anxiety about losing your teeth is just anxiety about losing your teeth, or about like declining physical appearance, or about aging. You know, things that seems to make much more sense to me than like guilt over rubbing one out. Anyway, take it together. These examples point to the same conclusion. Freud's method is powerful, but his conclusions aren't universal. And that's okay. Even genius has limitations. So anyway, what do you think? Do your dreams follow Freud's rules? Any bearded women popping up in your dream? Or clean-shaven men? How about that? Or how about the whole teeth masturbation connection? Have you dreamt about like your teeth falling out after like just a weekend of unhinged gooning? Anyway, let me know in the comments below. My name is Vince, and I'll see you in the next one.